Bocchi is literally me, for real, for real. No, seriously. So I don't usually prepare for these kinds of things, but with Bocchi, like, there's just I had so much to say about it that I couldn't really risk not preparing stuff ahead of time. So I have the slideshow. I know I have the costume as well. If you're watching this, but also I prepared a script, which I don't usually do for the reviews, but it just felt necessary. There is way more to say about it than I expected to say about it. So let's get into it. I'm also not used to reading from a script, so if any of it sounds a bit awkward, don't blame me for that. It's just not used to it, but I just feel like it's necessary this time. I won't shy away from spoilers, not for a Doki Doki Literature Club reason, like everyone has already been spoiled anyway, but because my favorite parts of the show are from the end, so properly expressing my opinions will be impossible without spoiling the show. Just watch the anime. It has great art, great visual humor, well written characters, and a lot of passion has been poured into it. You'll be missing out on a lot if you don't watch it. I didn't expect much from Bocchi, but recognized it was a great show from before it was airing. One of the primary components of Bocchi's greatness is the relatability, which is interesting because of how specific her situation might seem on the surface, yet it's a path that many people suffering from the same conditions go through. Bocchi's journey parallels my own in so many different ways. We both have moderately successful YouTube channels, um, which we use to show off and engage in our hobbies in a way that others may see, but isn't overwhelmingly social. In my early YouTube days, I actually did bring my friends into the videos, but over time, I naturally gravitated towards only making videos that I could do without any help. Like, actually, this isn't what I started my channel on, but some of my early videos were actual guitar songs. In fact, like, hers are guitar covers mostly, but she also does her own songs. So I've done, I think, two original songs on guitar that I've recorded and uploaded onto my channel. But I also have, like, I did a cover song and I did a parody on guitar. So it's not completely in line with her life, but like I have done guitar on YouTube. Bocchi's channel is more immediately successful than mine was. Uh, in terms of the manga timeline, our channel actually started getting popular around the same time, which was really like 2016, and that's around when she said that hers like really started to pick up pace. Um, and that was when I started doing I was gonna say Ore Sama Kingdom. That was in 2016. But in the anime, the timeline has actually shifted a bit. So instead of it taking place in 2016, it's actually supposed to be taking place in 2022, which is weird because in the universe, the pandemic just it seems to not have happened. Mine was 9 years old at the time, at like 2016, whereas hers she'd only had for a year. She also generally gets positive comments on her videos. Well, when I started out, I mostly got suicide recommendations or people questioning my sexual orientation. Although I think 2008 YouTube was just more brutal since they didn't automatically filter out hateful comments. I also feel like the way they handled YouTube in the series felt like a fairly realistic portrayal of it. I've seen um, so many anime use YouTube as a platform where you can instantly blow up as a quick way to make a lot of money. That was never Bochi's intention. she had a passion for music that she wants to share with the world, and she's more comfortable using the internet as an outlet for it than playing in front of a live audience. Even though when her online audience grew, it never came to her as an idea to use YouTube as a way of turning her hobby into a career, which is funny, right? Um, Turns out her dad had monetized her channel for her, but the money that she got from it was still a fairly modest amount, which checks out for someone who is only making money through ads and isn't using something like Patreon merch or sponsors as an extra revenue streams, or trying to cater to the algorithm to get their videos to be shown to more people. She does cater a little like for the like posting covers like of popular songs as well to get it into more people's recommendations, but she's not like heavily relying on it. The focus of the show, but for something that's become a big part of my life, I'm happy to see it shown in a realistic way. Like Bocchi, I play guitar in front of my school, but I did it alone rather than as part of a band. I never played music with people, which is a difference in our lives. Bocchi's dad claims that music is a common outlet for people with social anxiety, which seems to make sense to me. Even though playing may make you the center of attention, which comes with its own drawbacks if you mess up, it can raise your reputation if you do it well, which most laymen can't tell the difference anyway, and will think better of you just for having the courage to go on stage. Honestly, that's kind of like from my own experience that like I did a talent show in high school where I played in front of the school, and everyone seemed to just love it. Like no one don't seem to comment anything negative about it. Um, Even though like I'm not the best guitarist, but it's just like people like seeing it, right? And it kind of shows your own confidence, even if you're not the best. I honestly found playing in front of the school relatively easy because the audience turns into a collective entity. At that point, I don't really worry about the judgments of any individual, and instead, as long as the average opinion is positive, then I think I did a good job. I actually found it more difficult playing guitar in front of 20 people in my summer camp, partly because I was interacting with them more, so their opinions mattered to me more, but partly because as a smaller crowd, I still saw them as individuals. Bocchi didn't seem to view it this way though, and was nervous about the idea of playing in front of her school after already being comfortable with playing in front of a small audience. Um, One quote from Bocchi that stands out to me is, "I want to become just famous enough the playing music that I don't have to work," which is a sentiment a lot of creative people can emphasize with, including myself. I wish I could make a living from YouTube, podcasting, writing novels, or whatever else. Someone else had a quote on the same track, which is CGP Grey, um, the famous educational YouTuber, who said, "It's weird being an introvert working in a field where you make money based off of how many people see your work." CGP Grey, like Bocchi, never shows his face on camera, even in videos where his body is visible, and genuinely fears the possibility of someone recognizing him outside of conventions. He's talked about times where he's noticed someone who looks like they think they recognize his voice, and he's prayed to God that they don't say anything to him about it. There's a certain irony in the prevalence of social anxiety among entertainers, but something like YouTube, where you can do it alone, does make sense to be a field that would appeal to people who don't like talking to people face to face. since introverts tend to be better at dealing with people over a medium like text. I also think this tendency has a sort of selection bias. So many anime reviewers saying they strongly relate to Bocchi, since the kind of person who relates to Bocchi is more likely to become a reviewer. Something my high school gym teacher once told us was that he had social anxiety growing up and thought that becoming a teacher would help with that, since teaching a class of kids feels like lower stakes in terms of judgment than other adults, but it's a way to strengthen those skills. The art in Bocchi is really interesting. The character designs are cute, but not out of the ordinary. I feel very similar to basically anything else the coming out of Manga Time Kilala, which isn't a bad thing since I like that style and I'd enjoy the anime less if the girls weren't as cute. But that aspect doesn't make the show stand out. The background art is more unique, being very realistic in a similar way to Keion or Yamano Susume, where the backdrops are match up to real life locations, and even in a more intense way than those series, since there's some landmarks in the show that are literally drawn as a work in progress, meaning if you don't visit Japan right now, those locations will have changed dramatically. The construction fencing is an important part of certain shots. This doesn't give it an uncommon but a welcome appearance, but also helps to add to the realism of the anime. And I feel like the moe art blended with the backgrounds works in a better way than in Yamano Susume, and much better than in shows like Double J and Inferno Cop that just slap animation on top of pictures and call it a day. Another interesting art choice is the spontaneous art style changes that happen at various points in the show. They happen frequently enough to be an ongoing gag, but not so frequently that it becomes annoying or expected. Every time it happened, it caught me off guard. This is one of the few things the anime adaptation added, since this kind of visual humor wasn't present in the manga, or at least wasn't as prevalent. These changes were done to represent feelings in Bocchi's mind that couldn't be represented in words, and I think it worked really well. They were way more impactful than any alternative I could think of. The characters in the show are an obvious highlight, and not just the protagonist Bocchi. Bocchi herself is crazy relatable in the things she does. I think a large percentage of anime fans can see themselves in her shoes. She's afraid of certain types of social interaction, but also craves other types, but doesn't really know how to develop the kinds of intimate relationships that would allow her to have more comfortable conversations. Talking to strangers is difficult for her, but all potential friends are currently strangers. She tries using visual indicators like band shirts and trinkets to allow others interested in those things to start a conversation with her rather than having to figure out who else shows her hobbies manually, but it never really works. Um, Another relatable thing about Bocchi is that even after she gets friends, that doesn't cure her social anxiety. She gets people she's comfortable talking to, but she's just as awkward around others, although she does slowly get better at social interactions over the course of the series. Even when she's with her friends, she doesn't want her family members joining in because she feels the increased size of group to make things more complicated. I've heard some people claim that all Bocchi needs is a boyfriend to cure her social anxiety, but in practice, this doesn't actually work. there's a lot of people out there who have a partner who still aren't good at talking to people. I've even heard some people say that they have a girlfriend but no regular friends. There's no silver bullet to social anxiety. Butchie wears a tracksuit mostly out of laziness in a similar way to how Subaru from ReZero does, but I feel like it serves a double purpose to also obscure the size of her breasts, possibly to avoid unwanted attention from perverted males who only see her for her body, but also possibly to make finding friends easier so other girls aren't intimidated by her attributes. Not super relevant, but Saito Sakie from Demi-chan also wears a tracksuit, but her reason is purely for aesthetics, since she's a succubus and she'd be irresistible to all males without her tracksuit, making her less desirable. Uh, Bocchi also wears a knee-length skirt, which is significantly longer than most of the girls in her school, especially Kita, who wears like, and this is like at least a foot shorter than Bocchi's. Um, which is a style choice she shares with Hitori Bocchi, who also has social anxiety and a similar name. Bocchi and Kita have an interesting chemistry together. They both fear rejection but handle it in different ways. Bocchi feels more comfort in climbing into a trash can when things don't go her way, whereas Kita is more likely to deny it ever happened and simply hide the pain. Kita is much more energetic than Bocchi, and Bocchi is more reserved, sometimes to a dangerous level. But their differences do make each other stronger. Kita wouldn't have rejoined the band if Bocchi hadn't pushed her. Kita is sometimes too outgoing for Bocchi's taste, which is fine in a group context, but where you have more people to mellow her out. Bocchi seemed unfamiliar with the concept of lesbianism at the beginning of this show, but she is still young and could potentially warm up to it or discover something new about herself. Kita and Bocchi definitely aren't a canon couple, but I don't want to discredit a potential romantic relationship between the two. They are cute together, and their strengths and weaknesses are complementary. While talking in the Bocchi fandom, it seems like every pair of characters have some fans who ship them, which I guess is true for any show popular enough, but it's probably also related to the way the cast is characterized that leads to some combinations that a lot of people resonate with. Bokita is popular for the reasons I've mentioned, as well as I'm sure many others. Boniji is also popular, with Nijika also being an extrovert, but not as chaotic as Kita to make it a softer ship. I feel like Nijika would take good care of Bochi, and Bochi would also appreciate the calmer relationship when compared to her being with Kita. But I think it's less popular, probably partly because it would be more comfortable for Bochi. So it's just less interesting to imagine them together. Uh, Niji Ryo is a fairly obvious ship since Nijika and Ryo were already friends before the series started, and similar to Bokita, which also has an introvert and an extrovert. Kita Ryo may be one endorsed in the show itself, but similar to the Mio x Yui ship that Mugi is a fan of and Kaon, it isn't one that many fans identify with. Kita Ryo is similar to Bokita in some ways, but Ryo isn't as expressive as Bochi, which I feel like wouldn't make it as fun of a ship. Ryo is fairly pretty passive, which could easily lead to a one-sided relationship that Kita interprets as two-sided. Yeah, like I do feel like yeah, like Rio could just kind of play along with it, or just kind of like date her ironically, and like Kita would just totally eat it up. Bo-Ryo isn't too common of a ship, partly because being introverts, their dynamic isn't as interesting, and the relationship could have a hard time progressing. But also because of Ryo's financial abuse of Bocchi. Another thing I'd like to add on the Bo-Ryo thing is that they are different types of introverts. So, like, Ryo is like I could say that she's passive, but she's also like stoic. Um, she's kind of and she has a bit of a flat affect. Like she'll even when she says something that should be emotional, she won't put much emotion behind it. And sometimes Bochi will have like a hard time of trying to understand her. So I feel like even though on like first glance they feel like they could be similar characters, but like the chemistry between them, like as friends they can work out, but as lovers it would just be there is definitely resistance between them being lovers. Niji Kita also isn't as popular because it lacks the introvert extrovert dynamic, but they're fairly energetic, so it seems more fun than Borio and more likely to have good progression. One scene I find interesting related to Bochu's personality is the first time they play as a band together and how aware she is of her bandmate's shortcomings. Bocchi doesn't play nearly as good in a band as she does on her own, but even her more neurotypical bandmates also made some mistakes in front of an audience that they didn't in practice. And she was able to identify these mistakes while they were playing. This could be due to how experienced she is as a guitarist. I don't think I would have noticed things like that if I was in that situation because I'd be too focused on my own part that I just hope everyone else is doing their best. Kita is another interesting character. On the surface, she appears to be a confident, pretty popular girl, but she has her own insecurities deep down. She is an open lesbian, which confuses Bochi. I think it is a good thing that she is open about it because Manga Time Kila as well as Comic Kyun are notorious for having girls with ambiguous sexual orientations. So it's refreshing to see a girl who knows exactly what they want without having to be a Yuli anime. Although the other characters are pretty ambiguous, the fact that I can list through every single ship, like people view these characters as being lesbians, even though yeah, Kita's the only canon one. But yeah, I guess they're all cute together, but yeah, Kita is like very openly gay, which is really nice. Like it's like we just don't get to see that enough. Um, Kita literally runs away from the band, lying that she isn't able to play guitar like she claimed, but in reality, she likes playing guitar, but her skill is lacking and would drag the band down. Despite being on the opposite side of the social spectrum as Bochi, they share the same tactic of running away and hiding from their problems rather than confronting them properly. Kita does, yeah, like she isn't like she's known to not be the best guitarist at the beginning, but like the fact that she knows she likes it, but yeah, she doesn't. Yeah, it's funny that she doesn't feel confident about it. She doesn't want to just be open, despite how like kind of happy and friendly she is. That she still lets that get in the way of things, which is just a funny thing about her. And also, I just like to go through all the Austronesian stuff. Um, there is a fan theory that Kita is Filipino, which is partly because of her name. Like her name is Kita, which is the Tagalog word for sea. Um, but also she is just like her personality is that of a stereotypical Filipino girl, which is um, funny. Like I'm sure that's not what the author intended, but it's just a funny thing. The fans will like kind of breathe like this new life into characters. It wasn't really intended to be there. Yeah, going through the languages. Kita is the Indonesian, Javanese, and Sundanese word for we that includes the person you're talking to. So like in Indonesian, have kita for you, like we, including the person, and then kami excludes them. So it's like me and someone else. You're not included in it. I don't know what the versions for Javanese and Sundanese are for that. But yeah, I think that fits Kita's personality of kind of like all togetherness. Um, Kita means some other things in other Austronesian languages, like in Tagalog it means see. With Kita's catchphrase, kita kita, meaning I see you. In Cebuano, which is another Filipino language, it can mean we, but it could also mean gain, like to gain a skill. It does in Cebuano it can also mean we, but yeah, it can mean also gain, which is just cool, like to gain a guitar skill, right? Um, but also the English word gain is a guitar term for like not necessarily like um it is like gain is like kind of like reverberation. It's like your guitar kind of like a kind of distortion to like up the gain on it. So that's just like a fun like linguistic thing like this. Definitely not what they meant by it, but it's just fun that it could mean that. But in Maori, it's the most fitting, with kita meaning guitar, which is from the English. It's borrowed from English as kitara, which is meant to be guitar, and then it's shortened down to kita. Also, Google did claim that kita can also mean guitar in Hawaiian, but when you actually look at what the word for guitar in Hawaiian is, it's gita. Um, so it might be like a less common alternative or something like that. Like maybe it can also mean it, but it's just in most casual conversation people would use Gita. Kita is her surname, but that's what everyone calls her by. But her given name is Ikuyo, which is a Japanese word for "let's go," uh, which is also fitting, and it makes sense with the original with the Indonesian one of Kita for like everyone let's go. Um, Kita is very social, and in addition to being a Kasoku band member, she has other groups of friends. Um, she also assumes the best of others' intentions, like when Bocchi made a selfless decision to make things easier for her. Kita will think Bocchi is doing it for others instead, which is just really sweet. Um, Rio is also pretty reserved, like Bocchi, but as Bocchi noted, she enjoys being alone. She hasn't been seen with any friends outside of Kesoku Band. Uh, Kita has a big crush on her, although this never developed into a romantic relationship in the anime. Uh, it could, but yeah, like Ryo's again like Ryo's style, it doesn't really fit. with Kita. Like I can see why Kita likes her. Like with Ryo being like a good bassist and being like this cool, like she's cool. Like that's one of her positive qualities. I can kind of see her wanting them to be together. But at the same time, yeah, I also see Ryo kind of either kind of soft rejecting her or kind of just keeping her in the friend zone. Um, yeah. Um, but yeah, Ryo is the bassist, which I feel fits with her personality. Being as quiet as she is, she seems like she could be studious, but she doesn't get that good of grades. Um, Rio has one somewhat negative quality of having an expensive hobby that depletes her purported high family income. Nijika mentions one time that she comes from a wealthy family, but despite this, she still often doesn't even have money for food because of all the money she spends on instruments and other just kind of frivolous expenses. Um, she'll often borrow money from Bocchi and others and promise to pay it back, despite the fact that she will not reserve money to pay them back in the future, at least at the time that they would expect to be paid back. And she's fine being in debt to others. This quality of hers reminds me a bit of a friend I had in high school who would ask for money to buy lunch from the cafeteria every single day. Because he was from a low income household. He was given a card by the school that he could use to buy food at the cafeteria, but he liked getting the more expensive menu items, and so he would use it up prematurely, leading him to rely on others for money midweek. I never gave him money, but he did manage to collect enough each day to buy food. Uh, Bocchi isn't a fan of this part of Rio, but lacks the confidence to force Rio into paying her back. Not with like she did try, but but I mean she's Bocchi though. Like she can't really do much to force her. They do. She does end up getting her money back, but yeah, with a decent amount of difficulty and help from others. There's another character with this quality, Hinata Miyakawa from Lucky Star, who is impoverished but very unwise with her spending decisions, generally wasting away her paycheck on anime, manga, and video games, leaving very little for food. Ryo instead has the bass guitar and other instruments as her obsession and money sink, which is equally unhealthy, and she doesn't set enough aside for food. Yeah, it's like even people from like different socioeconomic standings, like if you're on, like if you don't balance your money well, like you're kind of in the same situation. Like it's sort of just big, say like the anime and manga and video games and like those are significantly less expensive than instruments, but if you're buying a lot of either, then yeah, like it just kind of eats away at your money. Road does have some positive attributes as well. I like her stoicism and aesthetic. She's expressed some generosity, like the time she gives Kita a high end guitar in exchange for Kita's much less valuable six string bass. I remember someone said it was, I think it's like a tenth of the price or something. Like she might as well just be giving Kita a gifted guitar. It's not like she's getting much back in exchange. Um, Rio's relationship with money is weird since clearly her parents earn enough to fund this passion of hers, but don't have so much money that she would never need to worry about money. And her inability to pay her own way or pay people back doesn't stem from selfishness, but more from poor finance management, which her parents should have taught her. Living paycheck to paycheck despite being a high income is fairly common in the music industry. Musicians often make a lot of money if they're successful and also have a lot of opportunities to spend a lot of money. A habit of hoarding instruments isn't nearly as bad as the drug addictions that so many popular artists suffer from. But if she already has these problems as a kid, then it could be a lot worse if she doesn't get a handle of it. Nijika is the final member of Kisoku Band, and she feels like the most normal character of the group. Her older sister runs the venue they perform at. She's the one who brought the band together, and she's the drummer, which is an interesting combination. She is a good drummer, but drummers are a less visible part of the band than the singer and lead guitar, so it's interesting for her to want that role when she's in charge. She watched Bocchi's YouTube videos before they met, and it took her a while to realize that they're the same person, since Bocchi was too shy to confess that Guitar Hero was her. From Bocchi's perspective, finding out that Nijika watches her made her happy to know that good people watched her videos. The fact that Nijika watches a fairly small YouTuber is also a neat part of her personality. She might watch other small creators either to get inspiration on how to make the band better or just to admire what others have made. And she's willing to dive deeper than just the most popular channels to give attention to talented artists who haven't gotten much yet. She even recommended the channel to Bocchi. On the topic of Nijika's role in Kisoku Band, an interesting, like, not parallel, but like kind of the opposite is Dave Grohl, from originally the drummer of Nirvana, who then became the lead singer and lead guitar player for Foo Fighters, which he founded. And I feel like that is a more logical progression, that like the drummer kind of is in the back, and when if you're like the one running the band, then it's like, no, I want to be at the front, I want to be the singer, I want to be the guitar player, I don't want to be still in the back playing drums. um, but I guess Nijika clearly sees it a different way, that she doesn't see it as you're kind of like in the back doing this. I get some people really like drumming. um, you see like some like drummers on Twitch who like are clearly very into it and are really passionate about drumming. So I guess it's not like necessarily that it's a lower role. Like some people really enjoy drumming, really passionate about that part of the the music. But other people, yeah, like Dave Grohl, don't really see it that way. Also, if you're curious about the lighting and stuff is a bit different compared to before. I had to split those into two sessions, which I was not expecting to have to do. Like, it is literally the only episode of this podcast where it's only about one anime rather than multiple, and yet it's also the only episode that I've had to do in 2 days, 2 sessions. Um, I guess maybe that's logical. Sort of like it was in Canada, like the political ridings, where it's like the the bigger the population, the smaller the area, and the smaller the population, the bigger the area, which like seems counterintuitive, but then when you actually look at things, it does make sense. Um, Maybe it's a bit like that. Like say like my shortest episode was the one where I talked about 100 anime, and now the longest episode is the one where I talked about one anime. Anyway, next character, Hiroi Kikuri, one of the few adults of the show. Like there are multiple adults, but um, like the actual main cast is all kids, but then we have like a couple of these adults who take these kind of smaller roles. And one of them is Hiroi Kikuri. She's pretty, isn't she? But she's an alcoholic. Um, Hiroi Kikuri doesn't show up until a bit later, and despite being an alcoholic, is able to give Bocchi some good advice and mentorship. I had a similar yet not identical interaction with someone at a work party once. When I told my coworker of mine that I was an amateur novelist, he told me about someone else in the company who was also a novelist, but he wrote in French rather than in English. When I finally met him at the work party, I noticed he had most of his teeth missing. The resources he used to help him with his novels were French specific, so he didn't have much he could help me with, and we just didn't have that much to converse about. He also spoke like he was kind of depressed, but that could just be because he's French. Sometimes people who are more advanced in your hobby aren't people you desire to be like. Kikuri genuinely scared Bocchi in this show, especially after learning how much they had in common. Being a successful musician and using alcohol to self medicate her own social anxiety. It's not an unreasonable fear either. If alcoholism is one path to success, even if it's an undesirable method, it could end up being the one that Bocchi goes down if she isn't careful. The Fault in Our Stars touches on a similar subject, but from a different angle. As the title says, even our stars have faults, and just because you enjoy someone's work doesn't mean you'll admire them as a person when you know what they're really like. Bocchi learns about Kikuri in the opposite order of events, where she sees Kikuri initially in her most vulnerable form and later comes to admire the work she does. Being an alcoholic doesn't make you a bad person, but it does make you less of a role model and possibly even a bad influence. As flawed of a character as she may be, I'd honestly really like to spend a night drinking with Kikuri. She seems like a nice person, and she probably has a lot more interesting stories from her past than what we got to see in the show. As generic as the character designs seem at first, they feel more fitting and more important as we get to know the characters they represent. Wochi has a very pink aesthetic, having natural long pink hair, with her parents and sister also have, as well as wearing a pink tracksuit in various combinations with and without her knee length gray skirt from her school uniform. Bocchi's combination of pink, yellow, and blue from her hair and hair ornaments, as well as her eyes, um, become very iconic in the anime community, as well as being played in visual gags in the anime itself. Kita's design is also very pretty. Her beautiful red hair is a fair bit shorter than Bocchi's, but her side tail is a fair bit thicker. Kita goes to the same school as Bocchi and wears the blazer they're expected to, as well as wearing her skirt shorter than Bocchi does. Unlike Bocchi, she's often seen smiling and presents as a very happy person. She was very excited about the idea of helping out as a maid at the school cafe, which is at least part due to her enjoying the concept of feeling pretty, which is in stark contrast to how Bocchi encountered that situation, which she was very much not a fan of. But Kita's just on the total other side of that spectrum, where she really wants to be a maid. Um, Although, what's funny is, like, for my own social anxiety, that being able to kind of, like, escape into another form kind of helps me get around it. Like, say, like, this kind of an outfit where I can kind of be someone other than myself. I can actually, I feel easy, like, social interactions are easier when I don't have to approach it as myself. But I can kind of distance myself from it by, like, kind of becoming this other person. But clearly that doesn't work for Bocchi. um, Rio has short blue hair and prefers a more cool and stylish way of dressing over a more feminine outfit. In in the maid cafe, she dressed up as a butler, which I think looks really good on her. Um, what did um, Her uniform includes a black jacket and a blue skirt, which she wears with tights underneath. Nijika and Ryo go to the same school, so they have the same uniform. She has long blonde hair tied into a side tail, but she isn't a foreigner. Red, blue, yellow, pink is actually a very common assortment of hair colors for anime. Her akoge is very prominent and triangular, giving her the nickname Dorito. Kikuri, being one of the few adults in the show, has more independence over her wardrobe than the high schoolers. Hitori Bocchi no Marumaru Sekatsu, which I mentioned earlier, is about a girl with social anxiety, and the two anime have a lot of similarities. But I think Bocchi the Rock is a significantly stronger show. They both contain protagonists with the names of Hitori and Bocchi, which together mean all alone. Both of them have a mature yet comedic approach to social anxiety that doesn't use the protagonist just as a thing to laugh at. Um, Watamote is also about a girl with social anxiety, but I found that one to just be much harder to watch or enjoy. It didn't really treat the protagonist as much like a human instead of just treating her like a clown, doing cringy things that the audience is meant to laugh at. Hitori Bocchi takes a much better approach, being more of a traditional cute girls doing cute things, but with a really shy protagonist who just wants to have some friends. In Hitori Bocchi, her friend group naturally expands after she creates one friend, which is generally true to reality. People tend to have friends, and other people will sometimes join existing friend groups. So you can use an initial friend as a sort of nucleus to get more friends. This does sort of happen in Bocchi the Rock, where after befriending Nijika, she doesn't have to put in any extra effort to become friends with the rest of the cast. But the friend group doesn't continue growing as the series progressed. This can be taken to the extreme in some anime. Like in the show I Don't Have Many Friends, the entire premise is that he is in a harem, but he lacks male friends, so he feels lonely in that aspect, but still has plenty of people to talk to. But that show isn't about social anxiety. Neither is iCut's Friends, where the protagonist has a goal of getting 1 million friends, and her friend tells her that if she becomes an idol, she can consider her coworkers fans and even her clothing to be friends. But yeah, if all of your friends are clothes, then you're still gonna be pretty lonely. Um, Hitori Bocchi never seemed to suffer quite as much as Goto Hitori. They both have social anxiety, but Goto's is definitely worse. Hitori Bocchi doesn't have any friends at the beginning of the show, and still doesn't have a huge crowd of friends by the end, but she seems to have an easier time communicating in general. Also, one thing that actually makes the Bocchi the Rock more relatable to me, um, but less relatable to other people, is her talent. Like, the fact that Hitori Bocchi or the Goto Hitori um, is like this musician, is like this person who has all this talent that she's developed by like secluding herself. Uh, that feels more relatable to me. Um, Whereas I've heard someone else say that gave the opposite effect to them. That they felt like, oh, she's so talented. She's like me in so many of these other ways, but she has this talent that I don't have. Whereas, like for me, like that was part of what really solidified her as being like this kind of kin. Um, so, yeah, that's. That just kind of depends on who you are. Yeah. Goto meets most of the friends she has in the series at all around the same time, and by playing music together, they're able to deepen their friendship in a way that just going to school together isn't as effective at. But that environment is also a bit of a crutch for her. When we see her alone with Ryo, they barely talk, even though she seems to want to, since it's awkward to be with someone and not talk. But having more people around can also aid in the social fluid. Even if she isn't a fan of large crowds, having more than one person to you're talking to can, so the burden is of figuring out what a topic and the possibility of your topic being rejected isn't on you is still something she would prefer. It's also just hard talking to someone who you would normally only interact with in a group, since you realize just how little you know about each other. I mean, I have like this big friend group of like 10 people or something, and sometimes like it feels comfortable being in that group of just like having all these people to talk to, and they usually know more about each other than I know about them, so they can bring something up and then I can kind of have something to bounce off of. But when you're like just with one other person, even if you spent a lot of time with them, you might not know enough about them to like really carry out a conversation, which is I guess is kind of weird, but I think that is just life. That's just how people are. Um, Also noticed when I used to stream on Twitch and I would like talk to people over Skype, which again is it's easier to talk to someone when like especially you don't have their face there. It's just an only voice, and the like having I think I really liked it when it was like three people, when it was like me and two other people, because if it's only one on one, then often the conversation goes dead and then it feels awkward again. But if you have like way too many people, say like a group of like 10 people all together, or like eight is really where it gets to be like, oh no, I don't like this at all. Like I'm not even talking. I'm just kind of listening in, which if you kind of just allow yourself to be like more of an observer than a participant, then that can be fine. But a lot of the time, it feels weird. It feels like why am I here if I'm not actually talking? When like what we're here to do together is talk. But when there's so many people together, like you don't really have much of an opportunity. Even if sometimes you actually have something that you feel like you can contribute, if you're socially anxious, then you might not actually be able to get that chance to like throw in what your opinion is on it. Hitori Bocchi seems like she would do better on in a one-on-one conversation than Goto, uh, even though she might have to muster up the confidence. It She isn't as prone to hiding as Goto. Hitori Bocchi also feels less ambitious as an anime. Bocchi the Rock has incredible animation and visual humor, as well as having the music aspect, which is also handled very well. Having good music, as also having a whole bunch of musical references that some people will be able to appreciate. Hitori Bocchi is much more typical of an example of the cute girls doing cute things genre, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's still a great anime, but it doesn't go as hard as Bocchi the Rock. Speaking of music, the audio of this anime is also fantastic. I unfortunately don't understand enough Japanese to be able to properly appreciate the songs in their original form, but I know that they are meaningful songs. Bochu was given the task of writing an original song and initially wanted to just do a generic pop song, which she isn't good at, but was convinced by her bandmates to write a more depressing song, which she was better at because of her own experiences. My first original song was also pretty depressing, being about a soldier with the curse of reincarnation after every time he died and rarely going a day without dying, singing about his wish to be relieved of this constant cycle and allowed to die permanently. When I submitted this song to sing at my high school talent show, they were worried that I was suicidal and forced me to write a disclaimer to say before the song. But in the heat of the moment, I forgot to say it. Um, but the students didn't make the same assumption anyway, so at least didn't comment on it. A lot of audience members don't pay that much attention to the meaning of lyrics, so I don't think Bocchi should be afraid of what she writes. The people who can emphasize with her will appreciate what she says, and the people who don't probably weren't listening to the lyrics anyway and were just there to enjoy the music. Also, Kita's the one who's actually singing, which does make it more humorous when the lyrics are dark. Also, there's a couple like examples of this like happening. Like when it comes to foreign music, it's easy because like, of course you don't understand it. It's foreign. But like you also say have like songs like "Pumped Up Kicks" where it's about like a lower class um, kid who feels depressed about being poor and his classmates being wealthier, and so he decides, oh, what if I just shoot up the school? Like that would like that would just solve so many problems if I just shot people and then scared them, and now like they respect me because cause I shot at the school. Um, but like the um actual rhythm of the song doesn't imply it as a dark song. It doesn't feel like that's what it should be about. But when you listen to the lyrics, it's like way darker than it sounds like it is. Um, but a lot of people just kind of don't really notice what it's actually about. Like people now know, like they hear what it's about, but a lot of people just kind of ignore it. And if you're not a native English speaker, then it's even easier to ignore what the meaning is. Um, yeah, there's also the Polish cow song where it's like, oh, it's just this fun Polish dancing cow. It's like, oh, what's the song about? It's about drug abuse. So it's like, oh, great. The music itself is aesthetically is good enough. I don't think the music stands out quite as much as the music in something like Full Moon with Sagashite or Eye Cuts, but it's definitely good music. I don't think every song needs to be a masterpiece though. Like canonically they are amateurs, and with that in mind, it's pretty good music. Bocchi's guitar solos are also great. The animation during the performance scenes is also incredible, focusing on what each band member adds to the song. Yeah. The animation sequences in terms of the band stuff, great stuff. All the voice acting in the show is really well done. I especially like Bocchi's voice. Her somewhat deep voice I find kind of sexy, and her voice actress is crazy talented, being able to make inhuman sound effects. All of the seiyus do a great job at portraying who their character is. Yeah, like all of them, and even yeah, like outside of the main cast as well, like that they all have great voices. But yeah, like it's crazy how she's able to, like, what was it, like some people, she even had to like prove like the fact that she could make that kind of sound of like this like, I think they called it like the banshee screech, and it's like how is she able to do that? But yeah, all the other girls like Kita and Rio and Nijika, that they all have great voices as well. Rio's is all, like it kind of, it's often yeah like kind of monotone, but it, I think in a good way as well. Like not not monotone like I used to be. Um, Like she just has like a kind of cool like stoic vibe to her voice. Um, and obviously Kita is just like she sounds super energetic in the exact way that everything else about her is. Something I've heard people mention is how the dynamic between Bocchi and Kita closely resembles the dynamic between Aqua and Suisei in Hololive. Both pairs have one very energetic girl whose militant extroversion makes the more reserved girl feel uncomfortable. Aqua and Suisei are also both musicians, and as an audience, we also get to see other parts of their lives outside of their music, although they are also other types of entertainers in addition to being musicians. Maid Cafe is a very memorable scene, and I was already aware of it before I saw the anime because of memes. They reduced the size of Bochi's breasts compared to the manga, which does make it slightly less impactful, but I think she's cuter with smaller breasts anyway, so I prefer that representation of her. I feel bad for Bochi in that scene, knowing what she was going through to dress like that in front of her classmates. At least it wasn't a bunny girl cafe that they had to do because I don't. Because she would have reacted even more poorly to that. One thing that adds to the show feeling like it's about me, but is totally coincidental, is the fact that their band name is called Kesoku Band, which means cable tie. This is a pun. They use a cable tie as their logo. Um, yeah, like Kesoku Band, it means cable tie. Like they're in a band, but like bands, they kind of like hold things together, right? Well, I guess any kind of band does. Like, say we have like First Nations bands as well. Like that's called a band, but it's just like a group of people. Um, oh yeah, it's like kind of like holds it together. And I kind of sometimes it can be ironic if they aren't really getting along. Um, yeah, I am an electrician, so I have to work with cable ties all the time to complete various tasks. This feels important to me that they managed to include a reference to my career. In terms of past careers, I also identified with the scene of Bocchi being forced to man the bar in order to generate funds. I'm sure this is similar for a lot of people, since when you're relatively inexperienced, the easiest way to convert your time into money is to deal with customers, despite how stressful that work is. It actually sucks as a job. I enjoy my job as an electrician way more than working at Tim Hortons, and I'm also significantly better at it, but that job paid poorly. It is an actual skill to be able to deal with customers at fast food restaurants as well as other restaurants, but there's enough people out there who can do the job well enough, and almost anyone can do it adequately, so it remains a minimum wage job. Like Bochi or anyone who's shy or not good at dealing with strangers, I wasn't suited for the role and performed poorly. Bochi took it to another level, refusing to even show her face to the customers. Another scene was the one where they decided to make a jumping photo inspired by the fact that jumping is something that generally happens in the OPs of Manga Time Kilala adaptations. Bocchi, being as unphotogenic as she naturally is, failed to look good in any of the photos they took. But after the fact, still looked back on the event fondly and even framed the photo. The family photos from my childhood often turned out this way as well, with me having a difficult time holding my eyes open. But I also didn't like taking pictures of myself, so these family photos were the main photos I had of myself, and I'd use them for various things. One cool reference that Bocchi the Rock had was the keychains of Koharu and Kiri from Slow Loop, an anime that also showed uh, Kasoku Band playing in one of its later episodes. I also loved Slow Loop, which is about cute girls participating in a hobby together, specifically fishing. Keychains and a physical performance are an interesting set of references. If Slow Loop is an anime within the world of Bocchi the Rock, I wonder what the band members feel about being included in the anime. And if the anime actually does take place in the same universe, I wonder what Koharu and Hiri feel about having keychains made of them. Like they do refer to it as any song, like she calls this an anime, right? So I think it is the former that Slow Loop takes place in the world of Boch. Like within that world, there is a manga and anime Slow Loop. So in their world, this is a scene that this is in an anime that they have Kasoku Band playing in this anime in their world. Like, just think about, like, especially Bocchi. Like, if she watches Slow Loop and it's like, wait, what? Why are we here? Why are we included in this anime? Um, as this reference, especially since they weren't that big of a band when like Slow Loop must have come out. Oh yeah, that's funny. Um, but also in terms of timeline, that's also funny because um, in in the original manga of like Slow Loop aired in 2022. In fact, the manga didn't come out until 2018, um, which means that it is a more recent manga than Bocchi the Rock is. So that's also like a kind of funny thing, but in terms of just as an anime, if you don't think about it too hard, and it's like, oh, it's just a fun reference, but like, if you actually think about what's happening, it's like, oh, why are they here? Another anime that it's worth comparing to is K-On!, which also happens to be a substantially additive adaptation, although Bocchi the Rock doesn't have as much purely original anime content as K-On! Does, and instead creates a better experience than the manga by the way they present things. K-On! More or less treats his manga as a blueprint, like a skeleton of the final form, which is fine to deviate from when necessary, similar to how Disney films are made. Bocchi the Rock staff were big fans of the manga and did their best to be faithful while also adding their own stuff when it made sense too. The backgrounds of both series are based on real life locations. The characters in Bocchi, I think, are also better than the ones in K-On! Obviously, Bocchi is more relatable, having deep social anxiety and having much more average intelligence. Having to actually work hard at learn guitar rather than magically gaining the skill, etc. But the other bandmates also feel like stronger characters. They also focus a lot more on actually playing music in Bocchi. They all have a genuine passion for it rather than just consuming snacks and abusing the club's resources. In fact, in Bocchi, they do music outside of school time and have to work to provide funds for the band's activities. Even if you're just watching either for only the girls in Bocchi are cuter. Their colors are more vibrant, the anime looks more modern, and the characters are more distinct from each other. The family dynamic is also more positive in Bocchi. Bocchi looks up to her parents and even shares her passion for music with her dad, in contrast to K-On!, where Yui's parents are never around the house. Nijiki also has a good relationship with her older sister. Seeing her dad as a role model is also a thing I can relate to. I share my passion for writing and for craft beer with my dad, and even YouTube was something that I was first introduced to by my dad, who made a couple YouTube videos before I got into making my own. I'm sure looking up to your parents must be a common thing, but growing up, I knew a lot of people who didn't like their parents. I was never a huge fan of Hitori Bocchi or Keion anyway, but what really surprised me is that I even found Bocchi the Rock to be better than my previous favorite anime, Yamano Susume. They both start out with girls who don't have any friends and participate in hobbies they can do on their own. The background art of both are also realistic, while the characters themselves look typically moe, with the Yamano Susume girls also appearing significantly younger than the girls in Bocchi the Rock, despite not actually being so. The girls in Yamano Susume are like 15, and the girls in Bocchi are like 16. It's like very marginal, but like they do look like little kids in Yamano Susume. The two shows are about different hobbies, one about mountain climbing and the other about music, and they both handle these subjects well. They both feel like good groups of friends. I identify with both of the main characters, and I wish I had an enthusiastic and cute friend like Hinata or Nijuka of my own to get me out of the comfort zone and hang out with. Um, Also, because of like Nijuka's, I guess just inviting personality, it sounds like a lot of people wish they had a Nijuka around, which like I had already felt that really strongly with Hinata, but yeah, like I can see like they are similar characters, and people do want someone like that around, like someone who's not like super over the top like Kita, but someone who's like really friendly and outgoing, that can actually get encourage you to do things and have a good time. I've seen memes of like people thinking Nijika is real because they want someone like that in their life, and I feel like that is just a common sentiment that people want someone like that around, that they want to have a girlfriend like Nijika, or they want to date Nijika specifically, because that is a logical thing to want to do. But like the other some of the girls do have analogs, like obviously Aoi and Bochi have an analog, like they're both very shy. Honoka and Ryo also seem like an analog to each other, that Honoka and Ryo are both like fairly reserved, like they like doing things alone. um, but they're not like, yeah, they're not like the protagonist who's just like totally like a socially anxious wreck, but they just, kind of like doing things on their own in their own pace and just kind of doing things alone. A girl who's also like that is Shimarine from Yulu Camp, that she likes to just do things alone. She likes solo camping, and in fact, she was even a little hostile at first to Nadeshko joining her. And like Honoka and Ryo aren't quite like, obviously like Shimarine is friendly enough as Yulu Camp progresses as well, and in the same way like Honoka kind of becomes more a part of the group, although she's still fairly hostile to her older brother. Um, and Ryo is they're both on the same wavelength. Also, Honoka's hair is fairly short and a bit bluish, which is also makes them more similar to each other. Um, yeah, they're both cute and a bit tomboyish. Despite my long love for Yamano Susume, I feel like Bocchi's approach is better. I identify more strongly with the main character, and the very rare, slightly lewd stuff, like the maid scene, feel like they're a more important part of the narrative compared to the pool scene or the shower scene in Yamano Susume, that feel like they're thrown in for fan service. Bocchi is shorter than Yamano Susume, so it also hasn't had as much of a chance to piss me off with any of the little things. The show is very tight, with every scene feeling necessary. Yamano Susume has one fantastic arc and an overall nice feeling, but Aoi's journey to overcoming both her social anxiety and acrophobia doesn't feel as efficient as Bocchi. Bocchi also has more standout moments. Hiking and music have both been important to me. I like going on hikes with my family and even on my own. I've written a couple songs and a lot more parodies. Minecraft parodies were what initially made my YouTube channel somewhat successful before it blew up through anime subtitles. Both of these series are slice of life at their core. Aoi also gets a job to have more money for her hobby, also being a customer service job, but she handles it much more calmly than Bochi does. Yamano Susume is still a very solid series, and I would highly recommend it to a lot of people, especially fans of cute girls doing cute things and after school club anime. But I do think Bochi handles its themes a little better, is more relatable, and overall a slightly better series. Overall, I think Bochi the Rock is a great show. Everything it tries to do, it excels at, and I can't think of anything it could have done to be a better show. Well, that's a wrap. That's all I have for today. Um, I hope you enjoyed my review, and I hope that God, I hope it all went well. There's like so much of it feels weird reading off of a script, honestly. By the way, not everything I said was actually part of the original script. Like there's other things I added in. And if you ever read this on my anime list or on any list, those versions are going to be slightly trimmed down. Um, but yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you resonated with what I said because there's also some things um, that I feel like I said that other people might not agree with. Um, but yeah, though that's at least most of my opinions. That I'm sure there's a lot of other things. It's hard to write about a series that I feel this strongly about. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed. Um, Also, if this is your first time watching any of this series, like I do a podcast. It's usually off the cuff, and usually I talk about 5 to 20 anime for like 20 to 60 minutes. Um, but this time was special. Um, and maybe you'll enjoy the other ones, although they're not going to be quite like this. But yeah, thank you for watching. I hope to see you again next time, and goodbye.